Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
In this episode of the Architect of Resilience, we dive into the science and strategy behind healing, aging, and true resilience with peptide and bioregulator expert Natalie Nidham. If you're in the space, I'm sure you know the name. Natalie is the host of the Longevity with Natalie Nidham podcast and founder of one of the world's largest peptide communities. Her background in functional nutrition, genomics, and biohacking has made her a trusted voice in this space. But what sets her apart is her grounded, systems-based approach to cellular optimization. Rather than chasing hype, Natalie teaches how to build real resilience from the inside out. So in this episode, we cover why most people are using peptides wrong and how the right terrain makes all the difference. The overlooked minimum effective dose of health and how to know when your body is ready for next-gen therapies. Bioregulators like epithalon and thymus-based peptides can influence gene expression epigenetically, and why timing is everything. The real story behind mitochondrial peptides and why using them at the wrong time can set you back. How to work with, not against, your circadian rhythm, HRV, and natural repair signals to unlock longevity and energy. And Natalie's surprising take on why peptides aren't the point. Your lifestyle is. So if you're interested in the truth behind therapeutic peptides, hormone signaling, and cellular health, and how to apply them practically, this episode is loaded with gems, both science and strategy. Another episode of the Architect of Resilience podcast, and my co-host, Anthony Castor, is joining us, and today I am super excited. I've been looking forward to having Natalie Nidham on our podcast for a long time. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be in the presence of you gentlemen. So this will be a great conversation.
So I'd love to just start with how you got into this journey from, holistic nutrition to where you're at now. I mean, you are one of the most trusted voices in this space. And yeah, just tell me about this journey a little bit before we get into it.
Well, thank you. So it's kind of been a lifelong journey, but I really only got into it. I'm one of these days I'm going to have to sit down with calendar and figure out exactly when I went back to school, but I went back to school, I'm going to say somewhere between 12 and 15 years ago, and became a holistic nutritionist. And this is after a lifetime of working in advertising, and which came on the heels of studying physiology in university. So I kind of did this weird kind of bounce. And the whole time, for my whole life, I was a fitness instructor. So I kind of always kept a hand in the health space very loosely. But I was always interested, right? And I was always I've always held the belief that the human body has an ability to heal, that if we can just tap into it and get out of the way, amazing things happen. So, that kind of is what sent me back to school at some point when I was so done with the whole advertising industry. And I remember having the actual thought going like, I so don't care. I just don't care. You just feel like you're moving money from one place to another. And it's kind of fun, but fun starts to wear off after a while, and you start looking for more meaning as you get older, and when you have that, having had those roots, I always missed learning and I always missed science. So I went back to school. I became a holistic nutritionist. And it was right around the time when biohacking was really kind of starting to bubble up. And I very quickly, after graduating from school, joined the first cohort of what was at the time the Bulletproof Coach Training Program that was offered by Dave Asprey et al. And it was funny when I signed up for that, which I did on a whim, which is exactly what I did when I went back to school. I was within 24 hours, I just spun around and did it. I didn't expect what I got. And what I got was, at first I was super worried. I was like, oh my God, I think I just spent all this money to learn about the bulletproof diet. This is a nightmare. And it turned out to be so much more. Like it was a really beautifully built course. It was I'm trying to remember, there was Ron, there was Ronit, Mark Atkinson was really the architect behind that course. And they taught us to be coaches, and they had embedded, heart math learning in there. And there was such a beautiful breadth and depth of material that we covered that had nothing to do with the bulletproof diet. And this was all new to me, kind of thing. So that kind of launched me. And after that, when you become a health coach and you're a nutritionist, and back in the day before social media was really a big thing or anything, you're sitting there going, okay, I've coached all my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my friends. How am I going to make a business out of this? And, you start going to conferences and stuff. And I stumbled across peptides at some point and was just fascinated by them. And that's when I started the Facebook community. And that it just snowballed into the podcast and into where I am today.
Awesome. That is that dates back a ways.
Wild.
And yeah. But one of the things I really love about, what you do is you're very grounded in, hey, peptides aren't just the answer for everything. And that's a problem I see with the current biohacking and peptide discussions that's, kind of permeating social media and so many other areas. And there's so many other factors that roll into optimizing our life. And as you said it, like the body will heal itself if we create the environment. And there's so many other tools and modalities that relate to that. So in the context of, peptides and life optimization, what are the most important lifestyle factors that need to be in place for peptides to work effectively?
Like it's so basic. I mean, people probably are going to sit there and poke their eyes out when I say this, but we know that it starts with foundations, right? And we know that, it's an interesting balance with peptides, because I do find, like, obviously you're going to get your best results if you're honing in on your sleep, your stress, you're learning to manage your stress. Excuse me, I have to cough. Sorry about that. If you're honing in on sleep, stress management, movement, and exercise, those two not being the same, basically honing in on diet, and at the same time, removing the aggressors, right? Getting rid of toxins, getting rid of massive levels of inflammation, getting rid of the sources of that inflammation. Like really doing your best to imagine that you're coming to a piece of land and you want to build a house on that land, and you want to make sure that there's not a swamp under the land, and you want to make sure that there's not poison ivy growing all over the place. Like, you want to make sure you're not on a floodplain. So you kind of, those foundations are always going to create better results for everything that you do, whether it's taking medication or taking supplements or or using peptides. Anything's going to work better. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes you can't fully clean it up. And this is where I think that sometimes a peptide can help people in the process of cleanup, right? And so it's really about using this kind of lost art of critical thinking that says, how much of this can I reasonably expect this person to get in place, but what else can I do to help them to have the energy to get the work done? And I think, like, for example, when it comes to healing the gut, and we know BPC 157, KPV, Lorazepam, we have all these amazing tools that help to support healing the gut. And we could say, and there was a time when I would say to someone, well, first you need to get rid of all these terrible foods, and you have to manage your stress and this, that, and the other thing. And you're sitting at this poor person who's like suffering. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is that these peptides can help that person even before they've done all that stuff, even before they've implemented all the changes. And what it does is it gives them an inkling of, oh, I might not have to feel this crappy for the rest of my life. I might actually have the energy to start to do the things that she's asking me to do. So you know, I feel like we always have to balance with clients. Same with musculoskeletal injuries. Like your repair stack is going to help someone out of the gate, but whether it helps someone permanently or not has everything to do with whether the biomechanics are being addressed of why the injury is there in the first place, or if they stop doing like these crazy CrossFit workouts at overweight, you know, all the things. So it's kind of like it's a balance between all of those things.
Yeah, I love that. I use a very similar strategy. I love the actually starting people with, not everyone, it just depends on the situation, but the oral versions of
Mhm.
GHK, KPV, thorazotide, tributyrate. And you can just like move things forward so fast within like 30 days, you get this buy-in. They're like, okay, now what's next? Okay, now I'm ready. Because you approach it and go, oh, here's all the things up front. And they're like, yeah, I'm not in for that. But you
Yeah.
get those wins and then, oh yeah, I can make that change in my lifestyle. Like I feel better already, right? But
Yeah.
like we can send signals to heal that injured shoulder like immediately and start feeling better. But if those neurological threat signals aren't shut off, we're gonna have, you know, reoccurrence or
It's just
something.
not going to go. Yeah. It's not going to go away, or you get it didn't work. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So
It doesn't work. Actually, you work.
You did such a beautiful job of explaining that, and my thought parallels yours. I almost think about it like a continuum, and or a pyramid, I guess would be a better example. And the foundation of the pyramid, to me, is lifestyle. And when you think about how many things, how many boxes we can check, if we just get outside in the morning, get a little bit of sunlight, get some electrons flowing, sync that circadian rhythm, we make conscious choices about the times we're eating our meals to keep that circadian rhythm in place, when we're exercising, the type of exercise we're doing, how we respond to that, however much or little of that is. Those are your layers. And then nutrition, you know,
Mhm.
eating in season, signals can be sent from food. And then of course on top, you know, we sprinkle the good stuff, the frosting. And that to me is the peptides and the supplements. And I tell people, you know, the broader the base, the less of this stuff you need up top.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, it doesn't work the opposite way. You can't just say, well, I'll do an upside down pyramid, that you're not going to have enough of that foundational support. So I always, and it sounds like you guys do the same thing. When somebody comes in, I guess we're kind of thinking about how broad can we make this base and what can we build on top of it? And then what are the simple wins? You know, what peptide single or supplement do we start with? And when they show that they can consistently do this and they respond with some change, what's the next logical step? Are there, you know, so much about all these cool devices coming out, and I'm fascinated by them. Um, with regards to those, have you seen any tracking devices or anything in particular that you think is helpful as you're working with clients and gauging, you know, which of these levels to the pyramid, so to speak,
Mm.
are working and which ones aren't, either objective or subjective?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fast-moving landscape, like, I can't keep up, right? And I
I
love
can't either.
your I love the idea of making the base as broad as possible because it's just gonna be less tippy, right? And
Exactly.
that's a beautiful analogy, like, it really works. So, I would say, you know, as a starting point, I do like the Aura Ring. If we can coach people not to obsess over the data, to understand that this isn't a judgment every morning, that this
Mhm.
is purely information that's going to help guide them in understanding what is and isn't working for them. I think Aura is the best. I know that there's people who really like Whoop. It's a bit more geared towards the athlete, but even then, I'm a little. First of all, I wouldn't be able to sleep with something on my wrist, so
Me either.
but I think Aura is a really great starting point. The next most powerful tool I think that we have is a continuous glucose monitor
Mhm.
because it can teach people so much about themselves, right? Between that and a food journal, I think that we arm people, individuals, we empower them to gain real understanding about what are they actually eating, how is it actually affecting their body, is stress affecting them in a negative way, is loss of sleep. Like, you can start just between those two tools, you can weave so many things together for people to help give them clarity, because it's so freaking confusing out there. Right. And I mean, people are like, even me, like sometimes I'm like, because everybody's very, very convincing. I'm like, oh, maybe that is the way.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
people that speak very authoritatively
Oh.
instead of offering some level of nuance. And like, we don't always have the answers. And there's some very strong voices that are just like, this is it. And that's,
This is
I
the
get
way. And
so
if you
many,
don't
every
like it,
time one
get
of
off
those
my
videos
page.
comes out, I'll get like half a dozen emails or text
Yeah.
messages. Whoa, people
Yeah.
freaking out.
Yeah.
And the Oura Ring's a great example. Like, my wife doesn't wear hers because it drives her to go, today is going to be a bad day because it said this, where, obviously, the least coachable people are your spouses and things like that. So,
Yeah.
but,
By you anyway.
but, yeah, I want to dive into like systemic resilience and peptide signaling. So, speaking about resilience beyond just like muscle recovery, getting stronger from that CrossFit workout, right? How do you define physiological resilience at a molecular signaling level? I'm kind of thinking around autophagy, redox homeostasis, inflammatory cytokine modulation, FOXO activation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that resilient at that molecular level.
So I don't really live in that molecular space. I mean, you're going into like I'm probably kind of a level above that, in the sense of, if for me, we want our inflammation to be under control, right? We want to be metabolically flexible. We want our cell membranes to be healthy. So, you get all these people who
Yeah.
come in and say, yeah, I'm going to do a round of Mont C. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But if your engine's kind of full of gunk, you're just heading for trouble. Right. And so, when we are talking about what's happening inside the cell, whether it's redox signaling or whatever the case may be, the foundational concept of, is that cell membrane healthy and able to function properly? Have we addressed toxins that the person is dealing with and exposed to? Are we looking at inflammatory markers and saying, wow, your HSCRP or whatever the case is really, really high. So we can't optimize a body that's struggling to function at a basic level. And so helping people to understand that before we get to that optimization program, what we're really going to need to do is help you to come back into some kind of balance and do that foundational work so that you can optimize. Then that's where I think we do people the greatest service. And Anthony's working at and I don't actually even know that much about you, Chris, but I know that Anthony's a medical doctor. Like, I don't work at that level, and I'm very clear with people about staying in my lane.
Yeah.
So I'm very clear. As a matter of fact, I'm not even working with clients at the moment. Like, I've kind of pulled back from that a little bit and just made a decision that says, I want to be this kind of like a curator of information. I want to bring people as much balanced information as I can. And I think that I can be much more powerful as a voice in that sense than doing what you guys do.
Yeah, I probably went a little too deep with my prompting there. It's really thinking about, like,
I was afraid you were going to do that. I was like,
we'll back up a little bit. No, I fully agree. Like, we've got to address dysfunction before we move into optimization. And I guess the greater question here is, like, at that cell level, like maybe a mitochondrial level, what level of that resilience do you think plays a role in aging? And, what kind of interventions do you use as far as peptides and others, and, like MOTS or SS31 or whatever, and how do they fit into that equation?
Yeah.
And little further, because you started just diving into that, is at that high level, what are you looking at that is your definition to see what those dysfunctions are to drive those interventions?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, if we're looking at mitochondria, that's a very granular metric, right? And the cool thing is we now have ways, and I mean, they're still evolving, but we have ways to measure, right? So you have a test like the Me screen, which is going to look at mitochondrial function. It's going to look at how well is the mitochondria dealing with the oxidative stress that it's under. I mean, the job of mitochondria is to create and to deal with oxidative stress. And when that balance starts to go off, we start to get into trouble. And I think that where people really go off the rails is they hear, and I mean, this happened a while ago. They hear that, oh, MOTS-c is really great for losing weight. I'm like, wait, what? I mean, maybe, but there are so many boxes you need to check before you can even go there. I mean, yes, we're talking about mitochondria. Mitochondria are the engines. They make ATP.
Yeah.
They're nutrient sensing. They're energy sensing. They're all the things. But there are so many things we need to talk about before we even go down that road. And, when you asked about like SS31 and MOTS-c, and then we can add humanin into that. So we have these 3 mitochondrial peptides. SS31 just got approved. I know that you guys probably know that.
Yep.
It got approved for very specific reasons, not just for biohackers wanting to optimize their mitochondria.
I'm not even sure it's such an obscure Banff syndrome or something.
It's a childhood disease. Like it's which thank God, right? Because if it can help these kids that aren't being helped by anything else, that's amazing. But for the rest of us little people out there, what's beautiful about SS31, and it's one of the few that's actually a synthetic compound. It's not a peptide that's naturally occurring in the body, but it is restorative to the cell membrane. And if we don't restore form and function to that cell membrane, you can MOTS-c till the cows come home. Nothing good is going to happen. And if you're looking at MOTS-c as a way to lose weight, there's so many other things we need to talk about before we do that.
I had somebody approach me about MOTS-c as energy for pre-workout. And I'm like, maybe try some caffeine. I like really?
Methylene blue might work with a tiny bit of caffeine.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does have that effect, but that's not what you should be going to or thinking about in the process. We need to.
No, and I've got this crazy little, when somebody really pushes me on mitochondrial optimization, it's like I've got this thing where I'm like, well, what would be interesting, because there's some interesting things out there, right? This whole deuterium idea that where these protons are gunking up the little engines in the mitochondria. And so would it be a good idea to get a deuterium test, find out if your deuterium levels are actually quite high, do a round of deuterium depleted water. At the same time as you're doing that, let's take care of that membrane. And so let's throw in some body bio PC oil or something to bring back those lipids to help the membrane kind of do what it needs to do for you. Let's make sure you're not dealing with some kind of mold exposure or major heavy metal issue. And as we do that and we restore function, and now we bring the SS31 in because it's being restorative, and maybe after a period of time, if you're starting to feel really good, maybe that's when we bring in a MOTS-c. Maybe that's when a MOTS-c might make some sense. Yeah. But I'm not bullish on the mitochondrial peptides for all, because I have a good friend who's a CEO in the biotech industry, and he worked for a company called Cobar. And Cobar was
4211.
What's that?
CB4211.
Is that what it is? Because I haven't followed them recently, but they were working with MOTS-c, and they had I don't know how many different iterations of MOTS-c on a wall, and they were testing them all, and they found a couple of iterations that were really powerful for NASH. And something happened with funding, and maybe now they're back because they have this compound you're talking about, which has another captivating name, as all peptides do. But but at the time, he said to me that the lead scientist at that company had said, "Man, I wouldn't just be messing around blindly with mitochondrial peptides. They are powerful, and we don't know nearly enough about mitochondria to really just loosey-goosey be saying, I'm going to use this and I'm going to use that." So That's
I
so
absolutely love
I'm a little
that.
more conservative on the mitochondrial peptide front.
Well, I agree. I mean, like MOTS is, reprogramming, that mitochondria. Well, like I think about it. I'm an engineer in my background, right?
Oh,
And so I'm thinking about, this is the new tune for your car. Well, it
mhm,
doesn't do a whole lot of good if the rods are knocking
mhm.
and you're running low on oil. Like that tune is going to send you to the mechanic so much faster by pushing that engine harder that
Yeah,
is broken to begin with, right?
yeah,
Just to really simplify the concepts down. Like
yeah,
you do that after you've taken care of all those other things, then you're going, okay, now can I enhance that last little bit to get that extra 5% because I've got this fine running machine. I need to dial in that air fuel mixture, how it's firing. Then we can move that. You don't start there. Like that
yeah,
is going to
yeah.
create more issues than not. You need to.
Yeah, and I think it's particular to some of these like the MOTS and the humanins, right? I think with you get a little more latitude with the repair peptides because they're a bit broader, they're a bit gentler, they're less about boosting, they're they're more restorative, as it were. But I think that when you get into this other category of peptides that can have real positive, but also some negative impact if they're not used properly. I think this is where people are doing themselves a disservice by not going and finding a coach or a practitioner who can really walk with them and help them through this process. Because, yeah, I mean, you may be saving money on the front end, but what you're playing with is your body, and you only get one. So, like,
I love the lens that you look at things through, and I love your philosophy mirrors mine that you teach somebody how to fish. Essentially,
mhm,
you're a broker of information, and when people understand this, they make good decisions. And I'd love to circle back to the Oura Ring because I think that's something accessible that people can identify with. And when somebody is coming to you when you were doing coaching or
mhm.
in your group and they say, I got this Aura Ring data, I'm curious of the different metrics on there. If there's one or two that you really like, how you interpret the trends, and then maybe from a peptide level, what are some suggestions you make? So kind of, I always love learning the thought behind stuff. So,
Yeah.
and you have such a beautiful way of looking at things. If maybe use the Aura Ring for an example.
Sure. I mean, with Aura, I'm looking at all of it, right? You
Mhm.
want to, there's, and as time has gone on, there's been an increasing amount of information. One of the things I always say to people that's really important about Aura or any other of these devices we have right now is don't take it as an absolute. Take it as, and you said the word trend, take it as an indication of where you are somewhere in space
Mhm.
and time. Your HRV may be higher, it may be lower. What we're really looking at is where is it relative to where it was yesterday? Where is it relative to where it was last month? And if you're starting to see a trend of things starting to tank, so let's start to think about how has your life changed? Like what has changed in your world that could be driving this? Have you suddenly started working out 5 days in a row every single week? And is it possible that your system is not able to keep up with that degree? What's happening with your deep sleep or people freak out, well, I'm not getting enough deep sleep or I'm not getting enough REM sleep. And I'm like, you need to just chill for a minute. Like
Yeah.
we need a couple of months of data to really understand you and how this ring is capturing your information, which may or may not be absolutely true, but it's giving us an idea of where you are. Like what happens when you travel? What happens if you're sleeping hot or cold or whatever the case may be? Like it's helping people to really use this data as a guide, as a gentle. I mean, I have one friend who's like, well, I didn't get a crown last night. That really sucks. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? Like if her sleep's not in the 90s, she's had a terrible night of sleep.
I've had a lot of terrible nights.
Right? I mean, thank God
Yeah.
we're still upright. But
Yeah.
but it's really helping to educate people to understand how do we use this and how much we give it importance to the degree that it helps us. It gives us feedback. But we don't let it rule our lives. And so when it comes to bringing peptides or whatever else into the mix, like I'm a huge fan of the bioregulators. You guys probably know that. I talk about
Yeah.
them more than I do almost anything else. And, when it comes to the pineal gland bioregulator, which is apidolon on the synthetic side, endolutin on the natural side, this is one of the ones that makes me laugh, because people say, I used apidolon and I get one of two things. My sleep was amazing, or it did nothing. I'm like, all right, well, we have some questions to ask.
Yeah.
If it's amazing, that's great. And then you stop using it and everything goes back into the toilet. So we have to have a conversation about what that means. And sometimes with a bioregulator, certainly for older people, you can do that 30-day induction phase. Sometimes we need to do a few months of 10 days a month to kind of help it to stick, right? Sometimes we need to repeat that, because if you're 60 years old and for 60 years you've been kind of trashing your sleep, you're not going to fix anything overnight, particularly, and not even in 30 days. But let's say it didn't work or it didn't do anything. So now we have to talk about what else is happening around your sleep that could be having an impact. Whether it's what's happening in the 3 hours before bedtime, or how stressed you are during your day, or are you overtraining, or are you eating the wrong things? Like, it could be indicative of so many other pieces of the puzzle that have to fit in. So that's, it's if deep sleep is a challenge. One thing I've learned about sleep is there is no, and I'm sure you guys could tell me more about this than I can. There's no one thing that fixes everybody's sleep. It's such an amazing, as an engineer, you probably have a spreadsheet that's like 2 miles long of all of the different factors that could possibly impact a person's deep sleep, REM sleep, whether they're sleeping at all. Like, is their airway properly positioned, right? How many people have you worked with where they're taking the supplements, they're doing all the things, but guess what? They can't breathe. Or they read somewhere that mouth taping is really good, but nobody actually checked to see if they could actually breathe through their nose. And then they wonder why their sleep's really bad.
With bioregulators, you're such a wealth of knowledge on those. I'd love to hear more about, because I've used both protocols for epitalon, and I'm curious, like if you're deciding if I'm going to do kind of the low milligram for a long time or high milligram for the 10 days, are there any data points or objective or subjective markers that you observe that guides you in, like, maybe this is where we'll start? And second part to the question, what are your thoughts on following the epitalon with pineolon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be, I mean, pineolon also will affect the pineal gland, interestingly enough. Even, and I mean, like the Russians could not possibly have made it more confusing, right?
Yeah.
The pineal gland one is called epitalon. The brain one is called pineolon. Like, really, guys? Like, did we have to do this? So, I mean, you could take them together. You don't even have to take them apart. I mean, my thought on the bioregulators, for the most part, is that it's a lot of art that uses science as its foundation, right?
Just
And
like
so,
peptides,
yeah. And so for me, if somebody's having sleep issues and we're using the synthetic bioregulator, then I will go as high as 1 gram a day. I don't think of using any bioregulator for much longer than 30 days in a row, unless there's a real therapeutic imbalance, right? And so then you might do 2 months in a row of the 30 days if you're working with someone who's really, really struggling. But after that, I'm going to move into the 10 days a month cycling. And on the synthetic side, I typically don't go higher than 1 gram. It doesn't mean you can't, but I just don't think that it's that useful. On the natural bioregulator, that's where the dosing, you're getting into the 20 milligrams because if it's in the capsules. And again, it'll be 30 days, either usually 99% of the time, it'll be a month. And if we're feeling like the things aren't sticking and all the other things are pretty much dialed in, we might do 10 days a month. But I typically won't use a bioregulator all by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I'm using a Epigenetic and I'm thinking about what else are we trying to work on, I might marry it with pineolon, but I will definitely marry it with like the blood vessel bioregulator and the thymus gland bioregulator, just as as my kind of foundational longevity stack. That's always a go-to.
With that, can you dive a little bit more into the thymic bioregulators?
So there's one, right? It's called, so on the natural side, there's the thymus bioregulator, which I believe is called, I forget the Russian name for it, but there's the thymus gland bioregulator, which is the natural one. When we get into the synthetic bioregulators, that's where they start to fall out with different names. So we have Vilon, VILON, which is one of the immune bioregulators, which is almost like a standalone because it has properties like Cavinson would talk about it as a geroprotector. He did, that's the one he did studies on side by side with the Epigenetic on the transgenic mice that had the HER2 genetic defect where they would develop mammary tumors. And both of those independently reduce the incidence and size of tumors, mammary tumors in those mice. So Vilon is really, really fascinating. I don't think it gets nearly the attention it probably should as an immune bioregulator. And then we've got the other, which again, I get the names mixed up. I'm constantly looking them up. But we have Thymogen as one. Yep. So Thymogen, and Thymogen's interesting because it's not very soluble in water. So typically I know when CanLab used to sell it back in the day, they would sell, I think it was it 1 gram and you were doing 100 micrograms doses because it just wouldn't solubilize. And I don't know if anybody's figured it out since then, but it seemed to be very effective even at that dose. And then you get guys like Kent Holtorf with integrative peptides who created his Thymogen alpha 1, which is essentially Thymogen and Vilon together, which are really, really great which is a great immune combination. But what was it? I think thymosin alpha 1 has built into its amino acid sequence. I believe it's Thymogen that's built into the thymosin alpha 1 sequence. So they kind of intertwine and overlap. It's really quite fascinating. I mean, I sometimes wish I was a biochemist so I can kind of dive into the weeds and see how it's really affecting different aspects of the body. But definitely why, with the bioregulators, what I love about them is because they, by definition, are balancing compounds. Yep. It's kind of hard to go wrong, but it's fascinating to really think about the person who's sitting in front of you and start thinking about what are the systems that are involved in what's happening with them that could be supported with these compounds as I'm doing all this other work.
Is that other one thymolin?
So there's thymolin, which thymolin is definitely the injectable form of the thymus bioregulator. It's one of those things that whenever I have a friend going to Russia, I get them to bring it back.
I think that's the one you need zinc to activate also, if I remember correctly.
I think as long as you're not zinc deficient, you're good.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like GHK, right? Like as long as you're not copper deficient, you can use GHK without the copper. It's people who are copper deficient.
So when would you employ those? What kind of results do you see? And then how do you walk this path? And this relates back to the pineolon and epithalon as well, where the client doesn't have an over reliance on that. Like again, you want to use it for a period of time, and then you're tapering, or how are you going about that?
Yeah, I don't see them as they're not the kind of thing you can build a dependence on because they're not a hammer, right? The results are going to be, they should be fairly subtle. You see people, I think the invitation on, let's say we're talking about sleep with the pineal gland bioregulator with Epigenetic. The invitation on sleep is it's kind of like the GLP-1s. Like let's use this time to also do all the surrounding work to support the work of this thing. The way that I talk to people about the bioregulators is what these bioregulators are doing is they're epigenetically kind of restoring your gene's ability to function. You don't need them all the time. You've brought somebody in to tune up your system. You don't need that repair guy to live with you in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If he's done his job and you've created an environment where nobody is sitting there flipping the switches on the fuse box back the wrong way, that's going to hold. The fuses might blow every once in a while. You might have to bring the guy in, but this is not a situation where you have someone who needs to be there every single day to do the work, because once he's flipped the switches, you're good. If you're still having troubles, it's probably something else.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You've reset that gene expression. It's going to have an impact, or we've got some other base level dysfunction that we need to.
Yeah.
And I often find you learn a lot from implementing, an intervention or strategy like this, and it doesn't respond. Like you said, like, okay, now we've got a data point that tells us something very valuable. Now we can go back and understand, something else that maybe we uncovered and unearthed during that process.
For sure. I mean, look at like the prostate bioregulator with the blood vessel bioregulator. When you give those two together to a guy who's getting up multiple times a night to go to the bathroom, now this is assuming he's done his PSA test. We know he doesn't have a major issue. Sometimes, I've seen it, like in a month or two, all of a sudden people are sleeping through the night. Like it's a pretty cool acid test. Like it's pretty remarkable how that it's one of the ones that really shows us that these things are not inert. Like this is not a kind of smoke and mirrors here. There's something's really going on. Or the other bioregulator I like we can see a difference is very often with the liver. And I've seen people's liver enzymes normalize. Now they're also doing all the other things, but sometimes the liver bioregulator with the blood vessel, sometimes we need to bring the pancreas in because the pancreas is, these guys are all working together. We can start to see numbers start to normalize that they were okay, but they were a little elevated. And sometimes it's the last little push that they need.
Are you seeing an impact in the GGT numbers as well on the liver?
I think what I'm seeing more like the AST, ALT, like those are the ones that people are reporting to me. Like I said, like I'm not working medically with people on these things, right? Yeah. Like I hear back from people in the community and I'm like, okay, well, why don't we try this and see if that helps. On the thyroid front, again, I've seen the thyroid bioregulators sometimes do nothing, but sometimes be that last piece that they needed to bring in that helped the thyroid numbers to normalize. But
theory I have, and you can probably help me unpack this a little bit. When I think of bioregulators and I think about our genes is like a cookbook, and we love those recipes. And the more we read them, the ink starts to fade, and we want to make a correction, so we just write in whatever. And those are kind of those epigenetic changes. And my understanding of kind of how a bioregulator would work is it goes in, it sees those errors, it fixes them. So making the epigenetic switches back. And that kind of speaks to what you were talking about. Not really a dependence. It's like once you made that correction, you don't need to keep making it. And when I think about building on the cookbook analogy and where the question comes in, imagine it's a lot cooked book. And we'll just say that's wrapped in histones. I mean, who doesn't wrap their cookbooks in histones? And when we talk about the synergy with the gut, and things like that, and some of these, whether it's a ketone ester or butyrate, decreasing histone deacetylase, it's kind of keeping the cookbook from opening up until we can make those edits in there. So the question in there is, do you think there's benefit to, or synergy even, if we think about using butyrate or ketones with these bioregulators? Do you think that maybe when they're not working, it's because that cookbook's open? So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the other things, right? I think that it's the bioregulator is going to do what it's going to do, but that doesn't, and I think that that's why they're so incredible, is that they work really well, whether it's with conventional medicine, like some of Kevinson's studies were, okay, we have people with COPD. let's give the one group of people the conventional drugs, and let's give the other group of people the conventional drugs and the bioregulator. And lo and behold, the people that got both did better than the people without. So are ketones going to be helpful? Absolutely. I mean, ketones in and of themselves, I mean, they're lowering inflammation. They're doing all the things that again, it's creating a better terrain. And to your point, like those, if it's restoring the DNA's ability to express properly, as we age, that's going to come down again. It's going to fall apart again. So that's why we're going to repeat the bioregulator, whether it's in 6 months or 4 months or a year, depending on our age and stage and where we're at in life. And that's where the art comes in.
Makes a
right?
lot of sense.
That's where there's no written rule that says this is how many weeks you wait in between runs.
For peptides, check out shop.enhancedexecutive.com. That's me, not some third party I'm recommending. This is my venture and what I'm doing. Me personally managing the supply chains and labs that I've used over the last 10 years. And you can see the third party testing that I am doing, the lot control, all of that. Go check it out. Or you can go to chrisduffin.com and see all the things that I'm involved with, from ebooks on all the topics that we're talking about, our brand of PMF mat, the Zen Oro, or Build Fast Formula supplements, barefoot shoes, the Kratos flywheel, BFR bands, our red light partner, all that on chrisduffin.com, as well as links to coaching and the enhanced executive peptides.
Oh, I want to switch back to the prostate. That was pretty fascinating hearing the results that you're getting there. And I was wondering, what are some of the protocols, as well as what are you doing to influence the terrain as well when it relates to the prostate?
Yeah, so I'm not running prostate clinics.
I mean with the community,
yeah.
like the results that we're seeing. So just to clarify, like what have you been hearing feedback as it relates?
Yeah, so
to
it's I mean, it's about reducing inflammation is the fire that burns within us is the thing that ultimately is driving a lot of these dysfunctions, right? And so what'll happen is I'll have people coming into my membership community and say, look, I mean, or it was even someone I'm close to said to me, in order not to offend people out them, said to me, look, I mean, I'm up 3 to 4 times a night. Like, this is driving me nuts. And, once we know that they've had their physical and that all is good in the world, I'm just like, let's try this and see if it works. Now, if we try this and it doesn't work, then there must be something else going on. Right. And then that's where I'm like, okay, well, we're going to have to dig into what are the other things? Is it saw palmetto? Like, what are the other things we could be thinking about that can help to support this even further? Because maybe it's not an epigenetic expression issue. Maybe there's a physical reason why this is still happening. So it's, like I said, like I'm not doing, like I'm really working. If I'm working with someone, they've got their primary care physician or.
I'm just going, you have a lot of data points with the number of members and people and, advice that is going in there. And, generally what are we, what have you heard? So,
So, and honestly, more often than not, that protocol it's quite simple, and very often it can be helpful. It doesn't solve all the problems. It's not going to have somebody sleeping through the night necessarily, but if we can reduce the nighttime awakenings from 4 to 1 or 2, then we're heading in the right direction.
I think there's a brilliance to just starting somewhere and getting that feedback. To your point, a lot of times, people come to us, they expect us to have all the answers, and I'll be the first to tell you I am not the smartest one in the room. And if I am, I'm actually the dumbest one in the room. That when people come to us, we've observed things before we make an educated guess about where to start. And I think that for us and for the people listening to this, the most valuable skill you can have is, as you're observing, ask yourself, am I getting better? Am I getting worse? If I'm getting worse, it's almost like you guys probably remember, maybe I'm dating myself, the Choose Your Own Adventure books. And you always get to the end and you just turn different pages. And when you're trying these things out, I feel like it's a lot of the same, that you're starting on page 1 and then you got some decisions to make. And if you're calibrating with each decision, you're going to get to a great outcome. And I love that from your community, like the protocol you shared is tremendous. And I think, as you pointed out, it's not going to work for everybody, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means that now we can kind of mark something off the list. We've got another target to go after and recalibrate.
Yeah. And it's, what else do we need to do? Like, what else do we need to look at? Sometimes, I look at the bioregulator coming in, it may be fixing gene expression, but it's certainly not fixing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a deficiency, if there's some kind of malfunction, like, if there's something really wrong that's happening in the system, if the islet cells are dead in the pancreas, or the chief cells are dying in the stomach, whatever it is, it can only do so much. And that may give us an indication that we're going to have to lean more heavily and do more testing, or look a little deeper to see what's really happening here. And I think that what's nice about them, or what's great about them, is that they can be brought in almost at any time to see, could it be this easy? Could it be this simple? Have we done enough of the foundational work for something like this to be a player? They won't hurt. They generally will at least help a little bit, but they may not finish the job, because there may be more work to be done under the surface. I mean, it would be great if somebody was COPD, you're like, you know what, all you need is 6 months of the lung bioregulator with like the blood vessel bioregulator, and maybe we'll throw in some heart in there and you're good to go. And, there's already been a lot of damage done. So until we're in the world where we can regenerate lung tissue, we have a problem.
The way I envision it is it kind of levels the playing field. So if you have a gene that's misexpressing isn't the right word, but we'll go with that. Not expressing properly. Underexpressing. Thank you. Essentially, it's going to correct that. So it's you got a level playing field. But then when we think about, and this is where I think the lifestyle, exercise, all those things come in, we've got to interact with our environment now that we've got the good genes for those to be able to do their thing. And I think, and it's just an opinion and a theory, but I'd be curious your feedback, since you have a large population you're able to observe. And a lot of times when I hear people are using bioregulators, and we'll assume most of the pieces, as far as like we bought the right bioregulator, it's got what it's supposed to be. Most of those are in place and they're not seeing the needle move. A lot of times it's almost like, and I don't want to be overly critical, but if we're really looking at what they're doing under a microscope, they're not sending the stimulus with lifestyle, exercise, nutrition choices. They're thinking they drop this little capsule in twice a day and it's going to fix it. And
yeah, I totally agree. And I think we can't discount chronic stress or extreme stress. We can't discount things like if there's mold or toxins present, that's going to mess up your gene expression right out of the gate, right? I mean, and stress in and of itself will mess up your gene expression. We know that. So, which isn't to stress people out because everybody's stressed these days, and have them believe, oh my God, it's hopeless. But when it comes to this whole idea of stress, it is about, can we learn to deal with our stress so that it doesn't affect us in as toxic a manner as it can?
You made such a great point. And I think, and I know I even forget this with clients, that it's not, we've got so many things that we're thinking about adding in, but equally and maybe most important is just taking out the thing that caused the problem in the first place. So using the example of stress, if stress is what causes dysregulation in genes and signaling, and we don't address that and we recalibrate it, but we still got that stress, it's just going to go back to where it was. So I love that when you're working with people and you're putting that information out there, that really, it was an aha moment for me. Like, oh shoot, I forget to tell some people that, and really so important.
Well, with that, I think everybody's got some unique, stress management tools. And, for yourself, what do you employ and that you've seen good success with for managing managing stress. It's not like we're not going to have it in our life, but
Mhm.
our ability to be able to deal with that can really make a big difference, how we look at it and how we manage it.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's going to vary from person to person. I mean, it's going to go from like it could be for one person, it could be breath work. For me, if I don't exercise, it's like I feel like a pressure cooker, right? And so I have to move my body. I have to exercise. I have to, if I can get outside, that's even better. And you've got to find the antidote to what's going to help you. Is it going to be yoga, yoga is this beautiful movement that also brings in breath. And I mean, frankly, even if you're working out in a gym, you're bringing in breath, because if you're not breathing properly, you're not going to be able to get anything done. But if you think about it, it comes down to using breath and movement somehow to help the body to unwind and release. If you look at a dog, right? Dog has a stressful moment. What does it do? It shakes to reset its nervous system. I just read somewhere actually that I can't remember where it was, but they're dealing with people with PTSD. And one of the therapies they use with them is called shaking therapy, where they have them just shake for a period of time just to try and get rid of the charge in the nervous system and help the nervous system to reboot and rebalance. Yeah. So we all need to be aware of what the tools are that work for us. It could be as simple as a box breath or a 4-7-8, where you inhale for 4, you hold for 7, and exhale for 8. I mean, it sounds so stupid, but if you do that for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 rounds, I promise you will bore yourself out of being stressed. Your cortisol will actually go down, like those. And if you're like, okay, well, I can't do that by myself, there are a billion apps that you can now tap into. There's devices, there's apps. Sometimes I find the devices are maybe a little over the top, but they can be helpful for people.
Yeah. And just for those people that just can't feel like I'm going to set aside this time to, get in that groove of doing meditation and breath work, I challenge you to just on the hour, for example, take a couple conscious breaths, and you will feel a benefit. If you do that over the course of a day, it's going to have an impact. And if you've got an Oura ring on, you should see that change in your HRV. Mm-hmm. Right? So getting back, you were talking about exercise at the same time. We could get into, and we're getting close to the close of this, so we're not, but talking about the impact of certain peptides on, neuroplasticity. Like at the end of the day, like when we talk about lifestyle interventions, breathing, touching the ground, getting sunlight, having nutritious food, whole foods that are in season, like these are the base level signals. Actually, before you got on the podcast, Anthony and I were talking about little of the same, whether signaling PGC alpha and so on via exercise. Like this is like we can mechanistically create our body to send these same signals that we're trying to deal with from a biochemical standpoint. And so just getting back to how we started the podcast, I'm ranting, but it's valuable.
Well, and I think where the peptides can come in is as we age, starting to, when the brain is we need a little more impetus, right? Maybe we are going to do a round of dihexa and we're going to learn a new skill. And so but we're still going to exercise, because exercise, we know, increases our BDNF, and that helps us to build new neural pathways. So it's where can we start to layer? Because definitely, I think where the peptides and even the bioregulators come in is as we're raising the bar on how we want to live our lives in our 60s, our 70s, our 80s, our 90s and beyond. We don't want, like all of us were like spoiled little children, right? We're like, not only do I want to live a really long time, but I want to be hiking and I want to be moving and I want to be doing all this cool stuff. And I have no intention of retiring, and I'm going to keep, I want to keep going as long as I'm contributing and feeling productive and being fulfilled. And so this is where, there's a natural degradation of systems in the human body. Like that's basic nature. Everything that comes together kind of comes apart eventually.
Yep.
And so where the peptides can come in is start to provide those signals to rebuild and renew in a different way. It's a little bit like hormone therapy, right? Hormone therapy for women. I mean, there's all these people arguing about it's not natural. You shouldn't need to do this. Blah, blah. I'm like, okay, so here's the thing. What is natural is our hormones tank. We start to fall apart. And by the time we're like 60 or 65, we're done. That's Mother Nature's playbook, right? Mother Nature's like, I'm going to keep you around. I'm going to keep you hot and sexy so that you can attract the partner and procreate and have cute babies. Then I'm going to keep you around a little longer so you can raise those babies. And then I might keep you around a tiny bit longer just to kind of give them extra support. And then we're done. And then you exit stage left and we bring in the next crop.
Yep.
And we're like, actually, it's not going to work for me.
Yeah. We've got consciousness and we go, how can we change that around to work in our benefit?
Yeah. And so I see peptides a little bit like hormone therapy. It's working towards restoring and maintaining and keeping function where it naturally might be getting lost.
Yeah. I think that's a really good place to wrap this conversation up, like getting right back to the beginning. Natalie, where can people find out more about you, what you're doing, learn from you? Tell us all the places.
So the podcast is Longevity with Natalie Nidham, and you can find it on any platform. And soon, I'm sure we'll have a conversation on that platform together. And I've got a membership community called, I've got a membership community. I've got a newsletter. I've got all the things, and you can find those at natnidham.com on my website. And then you can follow me on Instagram. That's the other place where I end up sharing a lot about what I'm learning. So
I encourage everyone to go find those resources. I'm been a big fan for years. I wish I could say 10 or 15 years, but I've not been following you yet. So, but I absolutely love your work, and I've been looking forward to having this conversation for a long time.